Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Think of It This Way, Studio 7 Communications podcast about learning from any field. So, in case you haven't seen this podcast before, I am an instructional designer that works at Studio 7 Communications. And in the quest of making more inspired e learning, instead of going around using the same ideas that I get in my field, I wanted to go outside the box and leverage the wonderful network of friends and family that I have and talk to them about their jobs. And the beauty of it is that I can talk to anyone about any job and use the components that the techniques, the ideas, the components that they use for learning their trade as inspiration to include or to create new ideas for more inspired e-learning, for more creative e-learning. So all that said, in this episode, I have the honor and pleasure of welcoming Rabbi Schachar Orenstein to the podcast. Schachar, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, George. It's so great to be with you and whoever's listening.
Yeah. So usually I plunge right into the first question. What's your origin story and stuff? I hesitate to do that just yet. I wanted to throw in a disclaimer and saying that I will do my best to be very reverent and respectful and not like accidentally blaspheme about Judaism. I was just researching, and what I usually do is research a couple of hours before a podcast, get some general ideas and get some insights. And I researched Judaism and what being a rabbi was about, thinking, oh yeah, okay, it's the Jewish version of what I know about religion, about being Greek Orthodox. And I quickly found out, oh no, not at all. There's of course a basic structure among all major religions that is common, but the different denominations, the different connotations of a word, the different paradigms about what something means, what a document is, and how it could be interpreted in so many different ways. Like, oh my, this is not for the this is not something one wings. So I am a Greek guest, very humble and very novice about the topic of Judaism and what being a rabbi is about. And I'm even more humbled once I research it, thinking it'd be more ideas at it and being actually even less. But that said, I will keep it to scratching the surface of things. The central point of all this is more about learning and how everyone uses their function, how everyone relates to learning and their function. So I'll keep it at that so as to not accidentally step on toes and be completely inaccurate about things. So I will do my best to, be very humble and novice and be very upfront about being all that. So all that out of the way. Thanks once again for being here. And now I will get to the typical beginning, the typical formula, which is always interesting to me. Like I said, way back when I began, I shared my origin story of how I became an instructional designer. And I find that everyone's origin story of how they became what they have become in their major trade or major hobby or whatever, I always found it very interesting and very revealing. So without any further ado, the floor is yours, Schachar. How did you become a rabbi?
Oh boy, that is a big question.
Yeah.
And first of all, I want to tell you, George, in response to the disclaimer, that we're all learning, and I've learned so much from you already, and that's why it's a big honor for me to be here with you. And
Thank you.
if I can share a little bit about what it's like to be a rabbi and in the 21st century, I'd be happy to do that, and I'm not afraid of anything you throw at me. So, how I became a rabbi? Well, I'm still becoming a rabbi. I'm still overcoming, I think it's called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is like, what? I'm a rabbi? And sometimes it's like hard for me to wrap my head around that. And
how many years has it been?
oh boy. So I started in 2001. I was officially ordained in 2001.
Okay.
So I've been going strong since, for the past 20 years. However, even before that, I was an apprentice, a rabbi's apprentice, and in training for quite a few years. So it's been more than a couple decades, I would say.
All right. And so take us back to square one. Where did you?
Sure. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, it's a lifetime. It's also, the formative years of, my childhood that all, that led me up to this. And, there's various versions of the story. And I think a book might come out one day, maybe. And there's a lengthy version, a short version. I would say encapsulated in this way. This is one of the ways, and that it's been quite a journey. And I thought I was going to be a doctor, a medical doctor. I had a strong healer in me, and I still have a healer in me. That's one of the purposes of my life, is to do magical healing for myself and others. And so I thought it was going to take, the traditional route for a young Jewish man, which would be through medicine. And then I felt at a certain point that I wanted to try something a little bit different. This is a big question that you ask, and I'll tell you one of the pieces that got me to where I am was that I listened to a series. It was an audio cassette series at the time, and it was by a fellow by the name of Rick Jarrow, and he's a really interesting professor. He was in New York, and he put out something called the Anti-Career Guide. Mm-hmm. And this has proven to me to be a great map. I still think about it quite a lot. And one of the questions he asked us in this series was, if you can list 5 of the top people you most admire in the world. And so I did that experiment, and he said, take a look, is there something in common with those 5 the people that you most admire? And so I looked at that list, and they weren't all baseball players or soccer players. Maybe when I was 16, they would have been soccer players or something like that. But they're all kind of spiritual leaders. And one of them was one of my rabbinic mentors. And so that gave me a clue that, that's an area, that's the direction that would be most fulfilling to me. And indeed it has been. It's extremely fulfilling in so many ways to be a rabbi. I'll mention that another piece of that audio cassette series that I've been recently thinking about. And by the way, feel free to jump in at any time. Rabbis, we talk a lot. So, and I'll mention that there's also many different kinds of rabbis, mm-hmm. right? I was a congregational rabbi with actually the 2 of the largest congregations in Montreal. For 10 years, I was at the Spanish and Portuguese congregation of Montreal, which is the largest, one of the largest in Montreal. It's the oldest congregation in Canada. It goes back to the 18th century. It's quite extraordinary. And then I was also, as an assistant rabbi, I was 3 years in the second oldest congregation, which is congregation Schachar, also here in Montreal. So I've been in congregations also in Vancouver, in Montreal. That's one way of being a rabbi. There are also rabbis who are doctors and lawyers and business people and so on and so forth. So many different, and teachers, and you can be any profession in addition to being a rabbi.
Yeah, that's one of the paradigm stretches that exploded my brain as trying to research this whole field. So that'll be my follow-up question when you're done sharing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So let me.
Yeah.
Right. This whole question can take up 2 hours. So I'm gonna do the short version, obviously. And so actually, where I am now, we might be getting to where I am now. I'm going back to this Rick Jarrow. He talked about different models. So really, for a couple of decades, I was kind of in the establishment model, and recently, over the past few years, I've gone a more entrepreneurial route. We can talk about that. Coming back to the question of how I got where I am, so let me share with you a story. Among other things, there are many rabbis who are great storytellers, and so we tell stories. And I'll share with you this story. I had a really, really good friend, a mentor, and one day he was also at this loss of which path to take. He had problems of abundance, which are wonderful problems to have. They're the kinds of problems I've had throughout my life. is, which path to take. I could do A, B, or C, or maybe even many, many more options, thank God. And so he was wondering which path to take. Should he become a rabbi, or should he do something else? So he went to see, there was a grand rabbi, a Hasidic rabbi, kind of clairvoyant, who lived in Boisbriand, just north of Montreal, in this insular Hasidic community. And he went up to this rabbi and he said, Rabbi, what should I do? What should I be? What kind of career path should I have? And to his surprise, the grand rabbi, the community is called Tash, he picked up a book of Winston Churchill, and he said to this, my friend, he said, this is the kind of person that we need. This is the kind of leader that the Jewish people needs. And so my friend understood that, and he's a very spiritual man. And he went on to become actually now he's on the Supreme Court of Appeals of Canada, and he's quite accomplished and writer and so on and so forth. So I heard that story and I got excited about that, because I was really lost and I was really at my wit's end, and I had kind of exhausted a whole bunch of things. And so I went to visit this grand rabbi, and to my surprise, he didn't tell me to become like Winston Churchill. He said, actually, it might have been to his surprise too. He said, no, be a rabbi. And I think other people were not hugely surprised that I went along this path, because I was studying rabbinic-like things. So that's the other piece of this conversation, of this process, which is I was studying in a traditional Jewish setting. I had apprenticed to a rabbi, and all of a sudden one day I say to my master, mentor, teacher, I tell him, after I told everyone else, I'm wanting to go to Israel to continue my Jewish studies. And he said to me, to my surprise, well, if you stay with me and you continue studying, I will ordain you. And that was a big surprise to me, because I didn't think that he ordained people who weren't married. And I wasn't married at that time. Like, one of his top students had studied with him for like 20 years. And the day of his marriage, that's when he got ordained, after 20 years of study. So I thought he was still adhering to this Eastern European traditional mode where you had to be married. So I ended up getting married soon after, but I ended up, it was a difficult choice, but rather than going to Israel to continue my studies, I stayed in Montreal. I studied with him for a number of years, and he ordained me in 2001. And that's another piece about how this came to be.
Man, yeah, it's the first thing that I'll say is that it's funny that exercise you mentioned of the 5 people. I just took that maybe a year or two ago as a hobby in one of the coaching courses I've done, and I didn't realize how powerful it could be. But I think when I just revisited to fine tune the niche that I'd like to explore, or define it, the niche that I'd like to explore in the coming year. As an ID, it's like you just remind me of how powerful it is, how it's like in the midst of all this ambiguity to know this is where I'm going, and the results that have come there afterwards have been astounding. The fact that you can invest so much time and so much consistency and focus to be where you are, instead of scatter energies, which I honestly have been guilty of and have been very frustrated by. It's I commend you for finding that direction so soon, and having that commitment and that passion, that zeal, and that singular focus to make it all the way to the end. Well, the end. That said, there is no end, as we're about to discuss, but to ordainment at least, and beyond. So, next thing I was gonna ask, or I was gonna point out, and it segues nicely into this. As I prepared all these things in advance, these questions. I had just contacted you right before earlier this morning to say, okay, what is your official title? Yeah, you're a rabbi, but is there an official distinction? And you said co-executive director of Aleph Canada, which is an alliance for the renewal of Judaism in Canada. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that on top of being a rabbi, it seems like an extra thing. But then as I was researching what a rabbi does, this seems to be not so much an extra as just part of the duties, because the base duties of a rabbi just seem incredibly substantial, if not overwhelming. And this is what I got from the net. You can tell me if you've touched upon all these and how much you juggle at one time right now. But from Wikipedia, I looked up rabbi functions: study and teaching, number one. So that bodes well for this podcast. Judging, as in like acting as a judge in conflicts and stuff. Legislating, religious supervision, pastoral counseling, leading prayer services, celebrating life's events, charitable works, role modeling, outreach, conversions, matchmaking. I guess we spelled that. Not just the Jews. Let me say anyway. Synagogue administration, chaplaincy, public affairs, defending the faith, and interfaith activities. That's like what, all in a day's work, man?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, that's jack of all trades,
Indeed,
master of none. I've had and have my hands in all of those.
Yeah.
Matchmaking is the only one that not my specialty.
Right.
The way I do it is, I organize events where people meet, but trying to figure out this person with this person is not my strength.
Okay. But you okay, other than that, there's what, 17, 18 different things here. Do you rotate or alternate between those, let's say, in a given year, or two? Do you touch upon each of the rest of them?
So what I do like about the work is that there is a lot of variety, and different people also focus and specialize in different areas. Mm-hmm. So since I've left being a congregational rabbi as such, I've been able to kind of focus more on creative projects, and a lot of my creative projects now are about empowering others. So it's sweet, and so there's, what I like is that there's tremendous opportunities for contribution, for acts of kindness in so many different ways, and growth, it's quite amazing. It's actually, Time magazine had that piece about fulfillment in various jobs, and clergy is consistently, we don't always make as much money as the CEOs and stuff. However, there's a really tremendous sense of fulfillment when you're helping people and supporting people. And this year, especially during COVID, right? There's been so many ways of doing that.
So it's you can call it spiritual income, if you will, and more than compensates for any CEO differential, I imagine.
Exactly. And like you just said, it can be so overwhelming at times. When you play this rabbi role full out, for the moment we wake up, if you fall, a pious, let's say, traditional Jewish person, from the moment we wake up in the morning to the moment we fall asleep at night, it's full of activity and full of potential acts of kindness and deeds and prayer. And so it's an all-encompassing activity.
And almost I'm just thinking here, it's all the more reason to embrace an educational aspect, because there's so much I imagine you could burn out so easily, and you want to, for lack of a better term, clone yourself and just make more rabbi. Here I am probably blaspheming within 5 minutes, but just like producing more teammates or more ordained rabbis to spread the wealth and spread the culture as well, right?
For sure, that's been one of my fantasies, is cloning myself to help me.
You're in a position now that you can intern ordain. Once you're ordained, you can intern ordain.
So that's really interesting. I haven't yet ordained. Usually it requires a rabbi of a certain stature to ordain. I'm not there at the moment. Okay. And although one of my projects right now, the exciting project, is a lay chaplaincy training program. So we're going to be giving certificates to lay chaplains, and that's one of the ways that we're empowering people. And there are other ways too, where we're giving people kind of certificates rather than ordination.
That's cool. It's a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do have to juggle everything, I mean, if I, again, a part of this point of this podcast is making parallels with what I do as an instructional designer. So one of the buzzwords we have is a schema. It's like picture a flow chart or maybe an org chart, organizational chart, where you have like central ideas, and then, you know, you could hang extra ideas off the base of it, you know, little extra layers at the bottom of that as the pyramid grows and grows and grows. So to keep you grounded, to keep you capable in doing everything that I just read about 10 minutes ago that I'm still staring at here, do you adhere to a basis? Do you find yourself consciously reviewing the base of a pyramid, or is it just comes naturally and organically after so many years of training that it's more that you've embodied it after a long-term commitment to it?
That's a really, really great question. And a number of things come to mind. One of them is that's why we need people like you to help us, you know, it's balance. And that's been one of the great challenges is balance. And you know, I'm constantly looking for ways of doing that and making sure one of my teachers said, you know, the main thing is to make the main thing the main thing. And to
even LeBron James says that, and I think he was taught it by Pat Riley or something. So it's a very powerful transdisciplinary expression.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that's an ongoing challenge, let's say. So I was wanting to share this with you that you know, I just finished a 6-day date with destiny with Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins, yeah.
Yeah. So I got some tips and hacks for how to prioritize. Yeah, and I realized, you know, it gave me some an opportunity to reflect, to contemplate, you know, also work and relationships and so on, and time for myself, and you know, how to balance all of these things. And we can easily get, especially rabbis, rabbinic burnout is a real thing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Burnout in anything is a thing, but I especially respect the fact that given what I just learned a few like an hour or two ago, I could see how it's especially a thing for you. And I'm telling you, I think it's we're reaching a tipping point where a society has to flip around and rethink the way it thinks or the way it consumes. There's a term that I think one of the terms that's been creeping in, at least in terms of my field, learning and development, is information obesity. And I've realized it myself, like there's only so many, you know, freaking programs and courses and 7-day challenges and 30-day challenges, and everything seems so good. And I had like such a bottomless appetite for this stuff, but I've been experiencing the imbalances lately, and even in my body, I have to see an osteopath for a few things that aren't functioning the way they should be. So I think this is a sign that I have to prioritize and find, you know, what is the main thing, and that sort of speaks to the Pareto's law. You know, like 20% of your actions yield 80% of your results. So rather than treat everything on an even playing field, you got to start discerning, is this worth taking on? Like if I pick anything off that list, I don't know, like matchmaking, you already took off, but I don't know, defending the faith. Can I delegate one of my chaplaincy certificate persons on that, you know, and so that I can keep the main thing, because it's so easy to just, I've been guilty of consuming without turning around and producing enough of counterbalancing it with production and progress. So yeah, all that to say, I can definitely relate. If not, I'm sure if not just me, like a whole piece of the audience as well.
Yeah, what you just said, yeah, resonates. Actually, I just heard Tony Robbins talk about it too. He was an operator, right, doing everything, and so the art of delegation, like. It's biblical too. We have Moses needing to learn how to delegate, and he learns that from his father-in-law, Jethro, right? So this is an old lesson. That's one of the pieces that my growth areas, and that's what I'm learning, and it's great. I'm getting there.
We both are, and the thing is, this is something that I learned once at Landmark Education, the distinction of actually getting something and what they mean by getting it, to elaborate, is getting it experientially.
Mhm.
Like if you say, oh yeah, prioritize, oh yeah, it's a concept floating in your head that hasn't connected to your action. You're not embodying it, it's just floating. Oh yeah, in theory I should. And then you forget all about it. And then you still want to, like, run the buffet of everything and be the RoboCop of your trade. And it ain't working anymore. Like it took, like, some trips to the osteopath and a couple of symptoms here, some and inflammations of this and that. Is okay. Maybe, just maybe, I should go let it go from the blood-brain barrier, if you will, or if the theory action barrier of, oh, okay, that's what they mean by prioritize and 20% and find your direction. And so yeah, this is going to be the year, this upcoming year, or depending on when you're watching this, that's got to happen.
That's great. I'm so excited for you, George.
Thank you. Likewise for you.
That is wonderful.
And that speaks of the fact. Is that from Tony Robbins as well?
Yeah.
That's cute. But that speaks to the fact that sometimes for you to actually learn, and if we become more technical, learn in the sphere of behavior change, you got to have emotional attachment to something, right? And as instructional designers, we try to squeeze that in as much as possible. Like a simple thing that we do, standard operating procedures, is like, why should you learn what we're about to teach you, no matter what the client and the topic is? Well, this is what's in it for you, the WIFM. So that said, I was wondering, when you are in roles of educating, when you're put into that, does that come into play? Where do you use that? And where do you use it? Are you asked to educate? And this is where I started making my experience from, growing up Greek and everything. And are there little speeches at the end of formal sermons? Do you have a Sunday school? Do you have a Saturday school as an appendage to regular school? We have, festivals like, the souvlaki festivals outside the church. You talk about the little things on weddings or bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. Like, where do you inject that education as a
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to back up.
Yeah.
Just one thing for a moment and say, so one of the things that's also helpful for me, and this relates to education as well, is a map of the universe, you could call it. Mm-hmm. And I know the First Nations have a similar map. It's called the Four Worlds map. So this I got from one of my important mentors, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi. He talks about the four worlds. So we have the physical world, like our bodies, the emotional world, right? And that's what you were alluding to, incorporating the emotions. And then there's the mind, the cerebral. I know Gardner talks about different kinds of intelligence. And then there's the spiritual. So right. Spiritual, cognitive, mental, emotional, and physical.
Right.
So I like many others at this time, one of the things, this past year, we've been learning how to do education via Zoom. Of course. And and that's been really interesting. And I'm still learning how to incorporate the body, mind, emotions into the learning. One of the exciting programs that we're about to launch for the whole coming year is something we're calling Embodied Judaism, a program in Embodied Judaism, which is going to be incorporating integrally the entire body in the study. So even when we do tech study, it's going to be embodied tech study using emotions and various practices. I'm really excited about this. Actually, we're planning a cross-country Jewish yoga, cross-country Jewish meditation, cross-country dance, cross-country sacred sensuality. And so that uses what we can call a four worlds model. It's kind of experiential education. And this is something that, I've been incorporating. I do teach also for, in afternoon schools. We do have that. In the Jewish community, we have Jewish day schools as well as Jewish afternoon schools. So, my kids go to Jewish day schools as well. I teach in an afternoon school. So it's been really interesting, coming up with creativity. I've been doing kind of a lot of R&D with Zoom and best practices. That's a whole new world, and with some great results. I have to say, there's drawbacks and benefits, and we're trying to leverage the benefits that we can do, which are numerous.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just going. I predicted you'd go in that direction. Seems because I have the next question speaks to that nicely. I ask here, how are your education efforts or endeavors received? And it opens up a can of worms for me, just by the notion of Aleph Canada, and I'll just read it again to make sure I nail it. The Alliance for Jewish Renewal in Canada. It's at the same time, it sounds like very positive and optimistic. At the same time, there's almost a insinuation by the very choice of words. If there's a renewal, maybe it almost tips me off that there's been a need for renewal, meaning that there's been some sort of erosion. And I'm wondering, I've seen it in my own community, myself, and I'll get into this later. Despite my dad's efforts, do not have the religious zeal that he did, and I'll go into a little bit of detail later on. But do you find the culture in need of an external hand? I was wondering whether it's strong enough to continuously sustain the way socio-systematically the way it is now, or do you find the new generations like disenchanted and I don't believe in this stuff and the heck with it, and so where's it at, and how is your intervention, if it is that, landing with maybe not just the youth, but with everyone?
Great question.
Thank you.
We say, there's a lot of wisdom in that question, and the answer is yes and yes. So yeah, definitely. Some people are calling it post-ethnicity, and there's this movement on the one hand towards kind of what we sometimes call it assimilation and disinterest in anything to do with Judaism, religion. I mean, Judaism is a little bit more complicated than other religions because can be both an ethnicity as well as a religion.
I just read about that. I'm like, what? Really? Oh my God. Okay.
So we're like a cultural group on the one hand. It gets quite complicated, and it can be conflated.
Yeah.
So there is, on the one hand, kind of disinterest. At the same time as that there's disinterest, there's incredible renaissance and creativity that's happening. And so really what we're trying to do at Aleph Canada is to promote and to focus. It's what you focus on. I mean, if you focus on the disinterest, it's kind of depressing. So what we're focusing on and trying to fertilize and catalyze is all of this tremendous excitement, all these startups that are happening, and it's really mind-blowing, really what's going on, and really thanks to the pandemic, it's really creating these hothouses, and people are able to reach networks beyond what we imagined before. So instead of having a small local community, you can spread your beautiful wisdom teaching experiences to broadcast it to a huge number of people who are like-minded and who really resonate with what you're offering.
All right. So what I'm getting is like the people that are sort of out of it and have fallen out of grace, out of zeal, whatever you lose locally, you almost make up by gaining, geographically, internationally, if you will, or at least nationally, or I don't know. Well, I guess if it's Aleph Canada, you're focusing on Canada itself and not all over the world, but at least like you're changing with the times, just like everyone. So just like I've been working from home since mid-March, you're changing the way you operate, and I mean it's by force, but also you're making lemonade out of lemons, and it's like out with the old, in with the new, and this is a new paradigm, and fantastic, so.
For sure. I mean, I can give an example. I mean, it's, we teamed up with 5 different communities to offer, high holiday services. So rather than just offering here on the local level, we teamed up with 5 other rabbis
Nice.
and 5 other communities, and we mixed and matched and shared, and it was just so beautiful. We just did this a few months ago. And now I've been reaching out to Jewish yoga, as I mentioned, Jewish yoga teachers, meditation teachers, and others, all kinds of teachers across Canada, and coming together in a way that we didn't do before.
So again, you almost read my mind or read my sheet here, and we didn't even go over this. I offered to go over this, but we didn't. You said let's play it by ear, so here we are. You're talking about meeting up and combining forces with other rabbis. I was wondering, like in the field, we talk about it's not just in the field, even the Tony Robbins thing that you mentioned would do this, sort of having mastermind groups and doing what I'm doing, going outside the box, and instead of revisiting tired ideas from within my field, going out and inspiring myself from a day in your life or an hour of tasting, what your life is like to inspire my future e-learning. Do you have, I thought of this question before I did the research of and got that huge list of what you were doing there, but do you actually, or at least have in the past, had like interfaith masterminds, like with a Greek Orthodox priest and, anyone else, a Catholic priest, and I'm going to show my ignorance for Islam and all, but having a whole bunch of people, hey, how's your mosque doing? How's your church doing? Does that exist, that knowledge to bond together under the common intention of cultivating your respective communities and sharing best practices?
100%. I mean, that's been some of my most exciting work and interesting exposure. I didn't speak about that because I only spoke in a very encapsulated way about my journey.
Right.
So, one of my biggest rabbinic mentors, Rabbi Schachar Shalomi, would speak a lot about what he would call deep ecumenism. Deep ecumenism means that we're journeying together with people from other faith traditions. And so, a big part of my journey has been learning from, great Christian theologians, such as Matthew Fox, and attending one of his, some of what he does. Actually, I was at the World Religious Summit in Toronto just a couple of years ago.
Oh, very cool.
And that was really an amazing experience. But I've worked with a lot of First Nations. A lot of First Nations work. We did some beautiful things together with Christians and Sufis and Buddhists and Hindus. I've had, personally, I've learned a lot and been very inspired by seeing how other faith traditions do what they do, even the Greek Orthodox Church. Since you mentioned Greek, it's amazing how many similarities, how much common ground, and how we can be a support to one another, how we can learn from one another. And that has made me, I feel, a better rabbi, is my exposure to seeing how other people do, the sacred. And one of the things that Reb Zalman used to talk about, the way he put it, is that you can't really experience and understand or appreciate the beauty of a stained glass window from the outside. However, if you get the privilege of, a little taste, a glimpse of what it looks like from the inside, it really opens your eyes. And yeah, so yeah, I mean, I could speak about getting more into the granular. That's something ongoing. I mean, I was recently asked, I've spoken together. We have a Jewish Christian dialogue is another example. I was just asked to speak, on a panel with a priest and an imam. And so these are really interesting areas, and they excite me. And I continue in that lineage that I got from Reb Zalman.
Awesome. That's honestly heartwarming for me to hear that. In the end, we have very common goals. So why not borrow from each other while respecting our our distinctions and sort of cooperate. And it's now more than ever that is a good sign, and I'll get to that in a bit. So that goes into my next thing about clearing up A misconception I had about a few jobs people did a couple of podcasts ago. I thought I had this misconception that whatever is traditional is pretty static, and the person who broke that, ironically had nothing. A very funny comparison, almost. Hopefully, it won't be a blasphemous comparison, but what broke that paradigm for me was my interview with my cousin who plays the bouzouki. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, bouzouki, that's traditional stuff, folk stuff. That's, past stuff, traditional stuff. So, you learn it once, you learn all the chords or you learn all the strings and everything, you're set for life. And he goes, no, I still take an occasional course. Like he's a little wonder kind. He took this up, if you see that podcast, from a young age, and, he's like 21 and he plays it inside out. He plays English music and everything. But the one thing that stuck out is that he said, I still take occasional courses myself for the latest developments or the latest techniques in playing the bouzouki. I'm like, what? It's still going on? So from that moment, I'm always on the lookout to, and I've dropped the paradigm of whatever's traditional is static and never changes. And given that you've had these interfaith consultations, surely that has had to affect the your approach to Judaism. But not only that, I found that it seems like it's not just something, okay, we're in the 21st century and we're turning a new leaf. It almost seems like what blew my mind is that Judaism had the foresight to almost put this by design and to create a dynamic nature to itself from inception, as if it's like they knew that you had to be flexible, very adaptable, be like Darwinian, survival of, instead of the survival of the fittest, was like the survival of the most agile. So things that I read here is from Wikipedia is, for instance, rabbis have always been the main links in the chain of transmission, Masora, if I mangle some terms, I'm sorry, whereby knowledge of the Torah has been passed down through generations, learning from their teachers, adding new insights of their own, Hidushim, and teaching the public have always been the primary functions of the rabbinate. And other things that supported that: knowledge, inspiration, and mastery of Jewish law and traditions required to perform all other. Oh, okay, yeah, it talks about law more. Sometimes law even taking precedence in some circles over the religious aspect. Many Jews do not believe that Torah consists solely of its written contents, but of its interpretations as well. And observant Jews view the Torah as dynamic because it contains with it a host of interpretations. So it seems like this is what said, okay, this isn't just a Jewish version of Greek Orthodox here. It's not like a by the book. It's like, here's some of the book, here's the core, but feel free to go left and right and just adapt with the times. And it seems like, not only has it been prescribed like that from the get-go, but you're also doing that more than ever now. And it was practically prophetic in that we find ourselves needing to do that more than ever.
It's another great question. And certainly, one could say that Judaism has reinvented itself many times.
Yeah.
And throughout history, there's been a tension between the past and the future.
Yeah.
And that's a whole topic in and of itself. And one great rabbi, the first chief rabbi of at the time it was Palestine, Rabbi Cook, said that we must renew the old and make the new holy. Renew the old and make the new holy. So that's a mission statement, if you will. And there's many different takes and ways of doing that. And so obviously within every group, there are the traditional upholders who really feel that it's important. They're anchors and perpetuating the past. That's part of their passion and the raison d'être.
Yep.
And then there's the innovators, the R&D people, the progressives. So there's a great spectrum and everything in between, so on the spectrum within Judaism, as well as in other traditions. It's not just Judaism that has this spectrum. I would say.
Yeah.
And I would add that, that throughout different periods in history, there have been pivotal moments in history that have really changed and reshaped everything in many ways. And we could talk about, 2000 years ago was a big moment in rabbinic Judaism with the destruction of the temple and so on and so forth, and the rise of Christianity. And we're going through the past 100 years, another pivotal moment in Judaism with the Shoah, the Holocaust, the state of Israel, and now what comes next. I mean, there's been a lot happening in big shifts.
I can relate on so many different levels. Because you mentioned Tony Robbins, I'll boomerang him back in. At one point, one of his seminal works, if you will, for the late 80s, early 90s, was a Personal Power. I think he talked about the 7 basic human needs.
Yeah, they're down to 6 now.
Down to 6? Oh, streamline. Cool. We got one handled. I think and there are 2 of them. I just remember 2 of them because they were contradictory. They're conflicting. But one is the desire to stay the same, and the other is a desire to change. How the heck? But it's true. Some people want to be very comfortable and just retread the old stuff, and some people want to keep forging ahead. I've seen that dynamic in my family. I've seen that dynamic within the same person. So I think it reverberates across everything in life. Religion.
I love, yeah, I love that. I mean, I don't want to use too much Tony, but yeah, I think one of the ways he calls it right now is certainty and uncertainty.
Yeah.
I think this is coming up for a lot of people also, and for me in COVID. I mean, we want, some people, actually, I was just talking to a friend, he's like Groundhog Day, during COVID. It's like the same thing. We want some change, we want some excitement, we want something new. So yeah, we have both of these needs. And at different times, we need, one or the other.
Maybe that's where you hit the nail on the head at different times. I think inevitably they coexist. It's just like a sign, if you get it back into the 4 circles and the spirituality thing and the physical thing. Physically, they say, everything is energy, and energy is a sinusoidal wave. And it's just like an oscillation. It's almost symbolic between expansion and contraction, right? And so you're trying to evolve, but hold on to, be consistent with something, but evolve it at the same time. And beyond the woo-wooism of the Tonys and the philosophy, I've seen this live at Pratt & Whitney, where I worked there. It's a manufacturing line for engines, and always looking for the most efficient process to create an engine, or the most efficient process to create anything. I mean, we even use process maps in the training department because they said it's it's a universal concept that could be applied to anything, and it was. So here we are, mapping out who does what in the process. This document goes to this person, then it goes to this person, so it's a different person, so it's a different row in the process map and whatever. And the idea is, just follow the map, for the most efficient thing. The thing is, that map was updated every, month or something. What's the point of creating this map if it's going to change anyway? So there's a conflict even in that map. It's it's because there's a common core that you got to stick to, like Pareto. 20% will be a core, and then 80% will have to change a little bit. And it's it could be frustrating, but such is life. I guess the sooner you embrace it, the better.
Another metaphor Reb Zalman would use is to update the operating system.
Yeah.
So
we're not running 3.1 anymore on Windows. Yeah, it's and we gripe about another update, but I guess in the end, it's for our best. They're still annoying to go through, but yeah, absolutely, that's a good analogy. So speaking of dichotomies, at this.
Wait, I just want to anchor what you just said.
Yeah.
In the Hebrew Bible, right? So Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, we call it Kohelet. Ecclesiastes said there's a time to change, a time to stay the same, right? A time to be born, a time to die. There's a time for everything under the sun. So
yeah.
It's and knowing what time it is wisdom.
Wasn't that a Simon and Garfunkel song?
No, it wasn't Simon Garfunkel. To everything, the birds. It was the birds.
Birds, yeah.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes?
What's that?
Are they quoting
Yeah. It's thanks to them. I think it's the most famous line in the Bible.
Wow. Okay, I just learned something cool. Nice. Yeah. So that's a beauty of
Turn,
this
turn
podcast. I could talk about anything to anyone. It all comes back to learning and
to everything. Turn, turn, turn. There is a season. Turn, turn, and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to weep, a time to laugh, etc., etc.
That's cool. If you want me to append like the full version of you singing that, just let me know. No, no.
I almost brought up my guitar, but maybe another
All
time to keep me on tune.
right. So speaking of, yeah, the time to do this and the time to do that, I find that it all loops to the same thing, but I guess it's a question of how you manage it. I'm wondering if you find a dichotomy, a contradiction, a struggle, a tug of war between, like, you know, tending to your own culture, the desire to tend to your own culture versus the desire to tend to the world at large. And when do you draw the line, and when is it more important to focus on the culture and when at large? Like a concrete example is like, well, where do you draw the line? This day and age, I've seen many interfaith marriages. One of my old bosses married, he's Greek and he married a Jewish woman. You introduced me to someone who's both Greek and Jewish. I've met a few half Jewish people at work. So how, I guess from your previous answer, some people would be more, you know, bitter about that or more against that than others. But, you know, it's almost like sometimes you think, oh, okay, now I'm supposed to, because it's silly, just off the top of my head example, oh, because I'm Greek, I should help my fellow Greeks first, or the Greek charity first. But in the end, if someone else needs it and they're more attention and they're not Greek, then why should I let my Greekness impede that? So do you get where I'm coming from? Like,
100%.
So what's your struggle, or how do you manage that?
Oh, I definitely struggle with that one.
Yeah.
The particular versus the universal.
Yeah.
So rather than see it as a struggle, I mean, what's coming to me now is I'm going to see it rather than a versus, it's and, the particular and the universal. And so one of my, again, he's one of my big teachers. So quote Reb Zalman, he emphasized the universal in Judaism, and he called himself a Jewish practitioner of generic religion.
Huh. Cool.
And that helps me also, that idea. And yeah, where to draw the line is quite challenging. So at times in my life, I've been on the particular side of things, and at times I'm on the universal, and that's an ongoing struggle, I would say. And where I draw the line has differed. So at one point, you mentioned marriages. So at one point, I wouldn't if the food at the actually this was hard for me. Actually, this is one of my best friends from high school. Because the food at his wedding was not kosher, I wasn't able by my rabbinic association to perform the wedding.
Oh man.
And so that was really tough. That was a tough moment. However, now, I would do such a thing. So just as an example, and I have officiated. I would be. A lot of people would look askance at this, and I still struggle with this. However, recently, like last year, I performed a Greek Orthodox / Jewish wedding. My big fat Greek Jewish wedding just last year, and it was beautiful, and I learned a lot. Everyone learned a lot, and the couple was very grateful, and they're doing well. And I mean, this is part of hyphenated identities that you're talking about, how we have multiple hats, and so yeah, it can be challenging, and because there's pushback from the traditionalists, for example, when one chooses to go outside of the straight and narrow. So yeah, so I was, fully in the Orthodox camp. However, now, because of some of the decisions I've made, I'm no longer, I'm in the progressive camp now.
All right. So this is a parenthetic thing that just came up. So through these interfaith, I guess it depends on your perspective. You don't see it as a dilution of Jewish culture than more than an enrichment. You know, DNA wise, okay, like you're not losing something, you're gaining something, and you're
Well,
spreading
so
the culture.
it's a great question. We'll look at the specific case. So
Yeah.
this is a couple. I mean, both their Judaism and their Greek side was very important to them. And they came to a rabbi. They didn't come, I don't know, they could have come, I guess, to a Greek Orthodox priest. There's surprisingly a lot of similarities we learned about it, even in the marriage ceremonies.
I read about Hellenistic Judaism on Wikipedia. I'm like, what the?
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Hellenistic Judaism, also, there are some really amazing communities. Actually, there still are in Greece. Actually, I almost applied to be, I think, chief rabbi of Greece at one point. my spouse wasn't so interested at the time. Anyway, so where were we again? I was talking about,
Yeah.
so it's this particular couple, right?
Yeah.
So they could have been married by a justice of the peace, by have a non-religious wedding or non-spiritual wedding as such. However, they came to me, and because it was important to them, and they appreciated it, and they valued it. And if they wouldn't have had the opportunity to get married in such a way, it could, I mean, it would, the argument goes, it would create antipathy. They would distance them from potentially from Judaism, or any connection that they would have. So it's in some ways at the time it was, and I still struggle with it to some extent, it was a tough decision to make. However, it was one that I chose to make, and we don't always know if our decisions are the right ones. However, that's the one I made, and there was a lot of beauty that did come out of it.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, so from what I'm gathering, you're, especially with the evolution that you're describing by yourself, I would imagine you're of the mind that the blend enriches both cultures rather than dilutes either, or threatens extinction or whatever. It's a new, well, it's a hybrid that enriches both.
So it's a really, really great question. So you're tending to ask me a lot of questions that really are touch the essence of again, I'm bringing Reb Zalman in a way. I'm a student of his. So he talks a lot about an organismic model, meaning that the different religions, different communities, different cultures, we want them also to be functional organs. And when one cell tries to take over another cell or whatever, you get things like cancer and something. You can get deleterious effects.
Yeah.
So the idea is, we need each organ to be healthy and intact, and then also then there's beautiful sharings, and then the whole body works beautifully together and in a larger system. So it can be challenging. There's the gray zones and and so on, where can be there's a messy middle, we can call it, where it's not always clear what's the best direction, what to leave behind, what to change, what not to change. And these are really deep and often difficult questions.
Yeah, that'll speak to the conclusion here when I'm talking about challenges. But I have one thing I wanted to ask before that, and it could be also equally heavy. But before I go into that, maybe just like again, just a rethinking or a change of perspective of those messy middles could help things. It's like, oh well, they're the liaisons of the organisms, and they're players to ensure the smooth circulation of culture and goodwill throughout all the organs. They help make it holistic. So
right,
you could pitch it that way if
that's a nice way.
Yeah, thank you. This one I will. It's an extension of the conversation already, but it goes into another specific direction, and I'll go a little personal on my end as well, just to give you why I'm asking, the context of why I'm asking this. I wrote here, to what extent is Judaism supposed to guide people, and at what point do you suggest people go look outside of it for answers. And my context is I got to share this a bit of my life. My dad, super religious. Oh my! Ask anyone. He helped renovate not one but two churches on the West Island, Greek churches on the West Island. Any Greek on the West Island knows where they are. Well, the first one burned down, the second one's still there, and revered. And he was like president of the school committee, and he did a million things, and he made me do a million things, and I appreciate most of them. You know, like from altar boy to Greek youth club president, and the Greek school for 13 years on Saturdays is where I brought that up, and all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And without dishing too much dirt about my own family, basically there's nothing that anyone has asked doesn't know, but it in his religious zeal did not stop him from having personal issues, some whatever, some like childhood stuff, some, let's call it childhood trauma that we all have from different things. It didn't put a plug in that, and if anything, it was almost frustrating to see him be so zealous and yet so unfulfilled, or to have that still fester. And in the end, he even had like Alzheimer's, which just feels like it's almost like I read into it a little bit about the emotional side, wanting to forget things, wanting to escape one's plight or one's lot. And from there, and not only what it did to him, but what I experienced myself, I found that, okay, religion wasn't the panacea for him, and I certainly wasn't going to take it for me. And how we met through our common interests and connections with personal development, we've discussed, and we've explored a la Tony Robbins, the topic of limiting beliefs and how to get rid of them, how to identify them, how to test for them, and so on and so forth. And I'm like thinking, are you confident in saying, hey guys, we're doing our best with Judaism, but it's not the be all and end all of everything. There's also supplemental stuff. Or as it's turning out to be, as a progressive rabbi, you endeavor to actually take that kind of belief work that I'm mentioning, for example, and incorporate it into neo-Judaism and make that part of the thing. So in the efforts of making Judaism a panacea, like where do you stand on that conversation?
Thank you for this wonderful question, and it gives me the opportunity to share the story that I've been wanting to share.
Awesome.
And it fits right here. So I'll go personal too, and I struggled with my first marriage and divorce and so on, and I went to various rabbis and so on for assistance and healing. Before, during, and afterwards, and Judaism says that there's wisdom elsewhere, not just in Judaism. I mean, and actually, there's a blessing that you say, and I even say it now, and it's a blessing of appreciation and gratitude when we encounter wisdom, from wherever source it may be. So I after my divorce, I was quite blocked in terms of pursuing a relationship with another woman or a new woman, and I learned through my work with you. This is one example. I learned through my work with you that I would not experience untold suffering, heartbreak, depression, hell, if with another woman. And I had this subconscious belief that a new woman would bring me more pain and suffering. So thanks to my work with you, this is incredible. We did this work together, and also my new beloved soulmate, she did work with you at around the same time. And quite magically, I won't go into her work, but quite magically, it ended up that we got together. So,
happy to help.
Oh yeah, so we're eternally grateful to you for that, and we're just so happy together and blessed to be together. So that's just one small example of there's wisdom everywhere, and it says actually in our holy scriptures that that if we hadn't received the revelation of the Torah, that we would be able to, or that we would learn it through nature, through watching the animals, and there's wisdom, in the natural world all around us. So certainly, I mean, as you probably know, I mean, Jews throughout the ages have been at the forefront of research and science and thought, and been instrumental in bringing all kinds of gifts to the world. So we're not against the world. It's a really in this world, learning from others. Now some of the traditionalists would say there's limits. You have to be careful, not to look and learn from other, let's say, faith traditions or religions. However, the more progressives would say, no, we're in this together, and the only way we're going to get it together is together. So that's not necessarily off limits, while remaining authentic to who you are.
Awesome. That's beautiful. Very good. And I almost feel like selfish for drawing parallels to learning, but that was part of the whole intention of this going along. So I just note that sometimes there's a perception of an e-learning as a panacea to all that ails a company performance-wise. Numbers are down, let's throw them some learning. And we're trying to now almost preach the fact that, okay, yeah, this is just the start. By the way, to actually build a scale, sometimes it's like a motor scale, putting together an engine or something, you actually need to practice. So don't put it all in one, don't put your eggs all in one basket. We have to be cognizant of saying, go practice this, go practice that. Here are some job aids. Here's some, here's some pointers to the next step. So if I were to draw a parallel back to you, maybe it'd be cool for somewhere in the education, in the Zooms, and in the sermons or sermon equivalents or whatnot, to say, these are what our traditions state, or these are what our updated tenets state. I was reading about tenets and how even tenets are subject to interpretation. Now, the next step for you as you go out into this world and crystallizes into an actual result or an actual action is to do this or do that. Consider this and choose something, and then do it and observe a result, and get the feedback and carry on. So I think, be it religion or training or whatever, there's like a bridge to lead to someone from the theory to the action, so that they can get to the results and get the enrichment of the experience, and then do a feedback loop. I mean, that a feedback loop is just universal. Socio-mechanical engineering, social governments, anything. So that's what I would prescribe if it's not being done overtly already. But I suspect with you it is, or much more than traditionally anyway.
So I raised a lot of wonderful points, and one thing that comes to mind is that Judaism itself is quite action oriented, and repetition. We do the rituals and the prayers and so on again and again and again. So I'm thinking like Steph Curry, practicing the 3-pointers, and he just got 105 in a row and broke history.
Wow!
Just the other day, they have 103 of them or something on video. So through that repetition, and actually we have a tension also, since we're on this topic, between repetition, and the downside is become routine, and repetition and intentions. So I'm translating from the Hebrew. And again, that's a dynamic tension. So yes, repetition is an action is so important. At the same time, we need to make sure that we have the attunement, the intention, that we're not doing it just like robots and so on and so forth. So that's another creative tension. We seem to be talking a lot about these creative tensions today.
Yeah, I think they seem to come to the forefront, especially because in both our fields, we're trying to pass a message to a larger group of people that are supposed to be as one, and yet there's so many different idiosyncrasies that they're not really as one. They're like 25% as one, and then there's all sorts of little differences. And that was my last question here. In learning, for instance, okay, I'm gonna whatever teach sales techniques to a class, and there could be people that have just been onboarded, and there are people that have been there for a year, and then there are people that have been there for 5 years, but can still stand to benefit because they're adhering to old models or old techniques or old, like, even psychological tactics that have been exposed, and being too pushy or whatever, for example, and they're just clinging and they're too old-fashioned. So it's the dilemma of trying to create a mass message that hits all of them, and they're all supposed to act the same. They're all supposed to have the same avatar, as they say in the field. But really, being human, that ain't it at all. The best you can hope for is, like, 25% commonality. So there's an emergence in my field, in instructional design, trying to customize the experience. Where are you at? Have, and basically just picture done any coding, or even if you haven't, like a branching scenario. Well, if you've been ordained for 20 years, you get to skip the slide 10, 1 through 10 of what it's like to go through it. You know it already. We'll take you straight here. So you make it less tedious and less annoying for people by taking the same product but having so many variants within it to that their experience is pleasurable. And if you don't have the means for that, the funds, the budget, often in e-learning, you just fall back on the what's in it for you. These are very important things to remind yourself of, or you just try to sell it that way. If you know it, then you can reinforce it, or this will update your skills, or whatever, do a sales job there. So having read about tons of denominations, different break-off points in Judaism, when you're talking about, if we wrap up and go back to Aleph, about renewal, like, there's different people within Judaism that want to renew different things, I imagine. So how do you gain some sort of solidarity in all that? Because I've seen, and I'll try to be revealing but not too gossipy, whatever, but I've seen the squabbles in my community. I've seen things break down, and, like, instead of people not adhering to the ideals and just breaking down and degenerating into gossip, into squabbling, and even the priests have been cranky and bitter and politicking, and politics within there. And I'm like, that's part of the thing that disenchanted me at one point. Number one, yeah, my dad was super religious and got Alzheimer's anyway, and had his personal issues anyway. And number two, I just see this degenerate into some sort of soap opera. I'm like, this isn't embodying what you're not practicing what you're preaching. You're being incongruent. Why am I going to stick around? It's just, ugh. So how do you guys, I don't know if you guys have a better track record, or if that still exists, or what, or if it's at least addressed, like, if you guys have the willingness to address the elephant in the room, and do something about it more proactively. How do you guys go about it? How do you unify an alleged audience that is on paper one and the same, when in reality it really isn't, and move a whole movement forward when people really want to scamper off to this side and that side? Like, how do you pull all that off?
Good question. Great question.
Thank you.
Reminds me of the old story about they find old joke, perhaps, about the old Jew they find on a deserted island, right? He was there. And when they find him, they discover there's 2 synagogues on the island, right? And so they ask him, why are there 2 synagogues on the island? And he said, one is the one I go to, and then the other one is the one I would never set my foot in. So even, one Jew on a deserted island, there's politics. And
I read about Jewish culture having that self-deprecating humor. I was gonna say at the beginning, hey, yeah, in this podcast, or like to kick off, it's like, yeah, an instructional designer and a rabbi walk into a podcast, see what happens. I'm like, oh, maybe that's too much. Maybe now I could say it at the end. Now we've
sure.
We've endeared each other to our audiences and stuff. So, but yeah, humor is. I saw that, and I guess if I reflect on the Jackie Masons and the Seinfeld and all that.
Sure.
Reverberate throughout the. So I guess that's not just an aside. That's actually part of the answer, like the humor.
Absolutely.
Acknowledging this and say, yeah, what are you gonna do? And let's I think
Yeah,
probably an ointment to it, right?
exactly, because unfortunately exists. I often say one of the saddest books that I've ever read is a book called Jew versus Jew,
Yeah,
and it's really about all the fighting, the infighting
right.
that unfortunately exists, and the politics that I've seen very close hand, and I wish wouldn't exist because it does impede the beauty, the elegance, the grace from coming out and accomplishing all the wonderful things that we want to accomplish together. So that is an issue. And you also mentioned at the beginning, you're talking about how in business how things have changed. And one of my colleagues talks about how there's no more wholesale religion, what it's all retail religion now,
Hmm.
which means it's like niche marketing, right?
Peak
And
religion, but yeah,
yeah, so that's interesting.
yeah.
And I think that's part of what I'm engaged in, and what we're working on is, I mean, we're really going after and trying to appeal and to speak to kind of the spiritual seeker side of. I mean, people join religion and religious communities and spiritual movements for all kinds of reasons. One of them is social. That could be a driver, a sense of belonging, and that could be enough for them. I mean, or if we, as we were talking about the need for certainty, or whatever it is. So yes, he mentioned Aleph, we're branding, we're going in a certain direction that will speak to some very strongly, and others they would never step a foot in anything in anything we offered. And part of my growth and my maturity is is learning that that's okay. Like at one point I wanted to be a rabbi for all Jews, and in a way I kind of was, but kind of wasn't. Not all Jews are interested in Orthodox communities where men and women are separate and have very different roles, and so on and so forth. So I think part of the answer to that, and where at least where I'm sitting with it now, is to be authentic to my own soul, if you were, and my strengths and what speaks to me, and where the Spirit moves me. And right now, at the moment, it's not in to go into I mean, it's to go into more creative spiritual modes, and there's great things that are coming as a result of me listening to that voice within me, and within and within others and the community.
Do you find you're doing this? I don't. It almost sounds selfish. Like you're doing this for your. Well, I think it is almost a choice to be your most authentic self. And I mean, I've been drummed. I've had that drummed into me with like 30 years of personal development teachings. But do you find that that authenticity strikes the biggest chord with people? You manage to unite the biggest swath of your community by being authentic. It's like, I may disagree with X and Y, but man, is he on the ball? Man, is he a great guy? Okay, I'm not gonna, no one's ever gonna agree to 100%, but I like, I like the way this guy talks. I like, uh, he's worth having listened to and following.
So yeah, great question. So in some ways, I think I have reduced we use business terms, my potential client base.
Okay.
My potential client base might have been reduced in some ways, and what I'm discovering is that there's a much larger potential client base that I hadn't thought about. So what I mean by that is, so let's say, certain or many kind of Orthodox traditionalist Jews in Montreal are not going to be interested in my offerings. However, what I'm discovering now is that we're offering things kind of nationally across Canada, and so that's really exciting. So I get to be myself and do what I want and be the spiritual artist that I want to be and that I like to be, and surprisingly, the financial piece is falling into play, and I took a great risk by doing this career pivot, and after 20 years of being in a traditional community, although being a force for change and innovation also within a traditional framework, I got a little bit tired and frustrated of that, and I've gone what Rick Jarrow calls the Annie DeFranco route. I don't know if that still resonates, that model, which is working a little bit outside of the establishment and going one's own route, and it has its own benefits, it has its own risks and rewards. And thankfully, for the time being, there's been some beautiful and great rewards. So it's a very exciting time for me and the community right now as well. The communities, we've expanded from local to national, essentially, is what I've been experiencing.
That is pretty cool. I think in the end, it falls in line with the, particularly striking sense of flexibility that I said seems to be designed from inception, about going with the flow and almost having the ability, almost the emotional ability from that circle to detach from preconceived expectations or predictions or forecasts of what the community would look like. And it's like, okay, well, look, this is who I am, and for me to be fulfilled and happy and at peace with myself, this is the direction I'm going. I understand it won't be everyone's cup of tea, so people will drop off, but other people will come on. It'll all be good. I'm being taken care of. So hey, I mean, it just falls in line with the designers from how many thousands of years ago. So I think in the end, it's working out for you, and I'm happy for you that it is.
Thank you so much. And I also happen to be a bit of a yoga instructor, so maybe that's also helped my flexibility. And really, I also thank you for you being a guide on the side. And that's actually sometimes how I like to talk about this shift in rabbinic roles. And I think I might have got this from Ramdas or something. The rabbi is the guide by the side rather than the sage on the stage.
Right.
And rabbi essentially means teacher or guide. So I am grateful to you as your role as a healer, as a teacher as well. And that's a lot of what rabbi means as well. So
yeah, an undercover rabbi, I didn't even know it. Awesome, thank you, Schachar. So we're pretty much wrapping up, but here's the blatant plugs section. Is there anything you want to promote? Any you want to direct people to a site or to your activities or anything, or Facebook page? Go for it.
That's sweet. So right now, the best one probably is alephcanada.ca.
Okay.
And if you go to the Our People section there, actually, I have a really nice tool that I'll mention. One of my small creative projects was something called Pasu Picker. And basically what it is you click on it and you get a so-called random, maybe it's destined, maybe it's random, it depends perhaps. You get a verse from the Psalms, a verse from the Hebrew Bible, and it's there in Hebrew and in English with a visual. I've created these visual Psalms, and it can be really wonderful in a variety of ways for inspiration, for guidance, for contemplation. And so that's a tool, and you have to follow the thread that if you go to Aleph Canada, and then you go Our People, and then you'll see something called Pasu Pick. You click on it, and it's a little gift for everybody. And I think it's a lovely gift.
Super, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. On my end, the typical YouTuber spiel about please like and subscribe and leave comments and everything. And hey, like I said, the beauty of this, I keep saying, is that I can interview just about anyone on any job, because any job involves learning, and there's always some insights to be extracted from anything outside the box. So I welcome one and all to take me up on my open invite to interview you on your job and make some magic out of it, make a fun podcast out of it. So am I forgetting anything? No, that's about it. Like, subscribe, the comments, Cool. I should get those. Yeah, I should write to Tony and ask to get a few of those. So that is it for this episode, folks. All right, now that is it for this episode. Thank you for watching. And hey, have a great 2021. Thank you, Schachar, one more time. And see you guys soon. All right, ciao.